Welcome back to Archer's World of Literature, guys. This is going to be a little bit of a different one, bit of a wacky one. Melbourne is currently caught in like a freaking massive storm, and I just went book shopping. And I don't know if they're wet or not, but I just wanted to make a video. And I couldn't be bothered really drying my hair or getting changed, so let's see how this turns out. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterwards. These are games one must answer first. Welcome back, everyone, to Archer's World of Literature. Apologies for that silly little intro. I've tried to make up for it and make my hair somewhat presentable, but if it does its own thing in this video, that's just how it's going to be. It's crazy out there, really, really crazy. But nonetheless, today we have The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Now, I spent a few days reading this, and if you've come here to find someone who's really good about talking about philosophy, probably come to the wrong place. I'm trying to get into it. I'm through my friend R.C. Walden. He's crazy into philosophy, and he's super intelligent and just really has a good grasp of it. For me, I'm trying to get a little bit better at it and stuff. So I've read some Foucault, The History of Sexuality, Volume 1. I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna make me sound silly, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't understand anything of it. I didn't really understand any point he was trying to make. Maybe one. But as sort of my second entry into philosophy, primarily, The Myth of Sisyphus is actually amazing. This is really, really good. So The Myth of Sisyphus is Albert Camus' philosophical essays on essentially his question of, he's tackling the topic of whether life is or is not worth living. So he's sort of trying to tackle and understand suicide, which is a really grim topic, and that's a very, very hard thing to talk about, particularly in the time period when this was released. This was released in, let me just check for you guys, first published in France in 1942. He's mainly sort of considered an existentialist, and that's sort of someone that sort of talks about how life really has no meaning, and sort of questions like that age-old question, the meaning of life, right? But it's they sort of all agree that there really isn't one. And so Camus talks about his sort of philosophy is there is no meaning to life. There's no grand scheme, there's no underlying plot of something that we're all going to realize when we get older. Life is pointless. And that's a really hard statement, right? If you read this, the wrong time to be reading this in your life, this could be really, really hard to read. There are some positive aspects in there. He talks about how one can realize that there's no meaning to life but still find enjoyment and happiness in life by the little things. And he sort of argues that by understanding there's no point to life, you can kind of appreciate how brief life is, and sort of he's kind of saying you can appreciate the little things when you sort of can understand that there's no point to life, because when you realize there's no big scheme, it's going to make you understand the little things, right? And so The Myth of Sisyphus is kind of split up into a few different essays and pieces, all sort of revolving around his piece, The Myth of Sisyphus, in which he talks about the Greek myth of Sisyphus, right? And so Sisyphus was essentially this one character from Greek mythology who was somehow he was sentenced to rolling up a boulder up a mountain just to get to the top and watch it roll all the way back down again. And he was condemned to do that over and over and over again. And so Albert Camus sort of talks about how the repetitive nature of life, and how, you're just going to do something and there's no reward at the end, right? But at the end, when Sisyphus is walking down the hill to go and retrieve the boulder after the 1000th time, he has a smile on his face. He starts to smile at the repetitive nature of life. And so Camus has this idea of the absurd. And so for Camus, the word absurd means human beings sort of trying to constantly understand what the meaning of life is when there isn't one. So from what I'm getting, Albert Camus he's non-religious. He's not Christian, not Catholic, not Muslim, none of that. He's completely agnostic, I would suppose. If you want to chuck in he's just existentialist, then let's go with that. So in this book, Camus has multiple essays, and then there's actually an afterword by James Wood, and that's really, really brilliant. It's perfect as an afterword and not like a preface or anything, because you read through all this and then you sort of go, oh, that's what I took out of it, and I understood that. I didn't really understand this part of it though, and James Wood puts it into like a really modern way of looking at and analysing and understanding what some of the deeper things for people like me who is sort of a philosophy noob, what he actually meant with some of those deeper things. And so that's really good to read as an afterword. And so essentially in Absurd Reasoning, he first brings up the idea of absurdity and suicide, and he starts talking about people's reasoning for not, killing themselves or for killing themselves, and how the absurd comes into that. So again, his idea of weighing up, is it worth it to kill myself or is it worth it to not, right? And so he's sort of saying it's an absurd reason to not kill yourself because there's no point to life, but it's also an absurd idea to kill yourself because you can still find happiness, right? You can still find happiness and joy and friendship and love and all these things, and just like the small things, right? In the Myth of Sisyphus, page 86 here, that's where he talks about the actual myth, and he mainly just kind of describes the actual myth and kind of relates it to his idea of the repetitive nature of life, right? Then we have Hope and the Absurd in the work of Franz Kafka. Pretty self-explanatory, just got about 10, 20 pages or so of him sort of analysing the castle metamorphoses and I think the trial. And he's just talking about how Kafka talks about, has absurd characters that sort of relates that to his own philosophy. Then the last 5 essays were more personal ones about his time in Algiers and France, and Paris, of course, and Iran and Tapasa. And in the end is actually the artist in his time is actually an interview with Camus and what he thinks it means to be an artist. And so that one's a really good one to check out at the end of this if you're more interested in Camus as a man and how he actually came to be the writer that he was. So all in all, The Myth of Sisyphus is a great collection. I've just got this modern classics version. This is just a great collection of who Albert Camus really is. And before I read this, I had read The Stranger by Camus as well, and I was talking to R.C. Walden about Camus' work and just philosophy in general, and he was saying that I should read The Stranger first, which I did, so that was good, and then The Myth of Sisyphus, because this is his philosophies and on life and death, and then read The Plague, which is about men and women who are just faced with death, and it's like, oh, what are we going to do? Like, the plague comes into town, and it's just like, oh, what's the point of even trying to fight this, right? So now I'm just going to do some reading excerpts. Just a couple of things I underlined towards the end of the text that I just thought were super. They just called out to me. So this is in Helen's Exile. I'm just flicking through and finding a couple of things I've underlined just to give you a feel for Camus' writing style, see if you want to check it out for yourself. But so here in Helen's Exile, we have, for some time the entire effort of our philosophers has aimed solely at replacing the notion of human nature with that of situation, and replacing ancient harmony with the disorderly advance of chance or reason's pitiless progress. So just the way he writes it's amazing. The translation's really, really good as well. Pretty much just feels like an English text, to be honest. But this is in The Minotaur or The Stop in Iran. And he says, people make up their minds only when forced to do so. That's a really simple statement, but I underlined that because I thought that was like really powerful. This one's in Summer in Algiers. I really like the personal essays that he wrote towards the end. In the evening or after the rain, the whole earth, its womb moist with a seed redolent of bitter almond, rests after having given herself to the sun all summer long. And again, that scent hallows the union of man and earth and awakens in us the only real viral love in this world, ephemeral and noble. So what's funny is something that Camus does in this book is he actually criticizes a number of other existentialists and philosophers and sort of what their philosophies are compared to his idea of the absurd. And he actually, funnily enough, criticizes Fyodor Dostoevsky a little bit, which is one of my favorite authors of all time, the almighty, the Lord and Savior, Dostoevsky. But he actually I kind of agree with what his point is saying. He criticizes Dostoevsky's characters in Crime and Punishment and in The Brothers Karamazov and also in Demons, I believe it was. He criticizes all of his characters, and it's not untrue or completely untrue, for when they feel a little bit of suffering, they either just kill themselves or they just go and kill someone else and just completely give up. And that's very, very true. I mean, if you see the main character in Crime and Punishment, he's feeling a little bit depressed or whatever. He's just like, the only way to ascend human life and become a more knowledgeable person or whatever is to kill my landlady, right? But essentially what Camus is saying is that, you could be feeling all these things. You could realize there's no point to life if that's what you think. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, he's actually got a little bit of a positive approach to it. He's saying no matter how you think, whether there is or isn't a point to life, you can find happiness in the little things. You can, you can still have a smile on your face, even if you do know that. Even if you know that for a fact. Because obviously this whole statement and this idea of, is there an afterlife, is there not, is there nothing, all of this is metaphysics. All these questions are of metaphysics, right? Of what we believe reality to be like. And so, we can say we know something, we can say we believe in something, whatever. We don't 100% know, right? And that's also, Camus is saying that he 100% knows there's no point to life. I don't necessarily know if there is or isn't either. But he's saying, I suppose, no matter what you believe, you can always still have a smile on your face for something. So this has been The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. It's not the easiest read, as with a lot of philosophy books, but if you're interested in getting into Camus, or even just existentialism, or just philosophy in general, I think the translation for this and what he's talking about, if you're in the right headspace to read it, I reckon this is a pretty good entryway into philosophy. Whether you agree or don't agree with what he's saying, that's the fun with philosophers, right? You just go, that's terrible, or that's amazing, or that really sits with me. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Sorry for the chaoticness of it all. The wet hair, everything. If there's a bunch of cuts in here or I'm saying a lot, because I know I do that, my cat has just been going like mental. I don't know, I just fed her and now she's just doing zoomies and she's doing like this growling noise. I don't know what it is, but I had to keep cutting it because the growling was appearing in the audio, so apologies for that, but I am working to get my videos of a higher and higher standard and a higher and higher quality as I grow this channel, and I really, really appreciate all of you that are sticking around. I know a lot of you came from RC Walden's page and channel yesterday, and I really, really appreciate that. I received some messages from people on Instagram, and that meant so much to me. Like, you guys know who you are. It really, really made me want to keep, getting better at my speaking and getting better at my reviews and better at my vlogs and all these things, and making better content for you guys to enjoy, and, creating more dialogue for us to talk about. I love doing that in the comments, all that. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next one. As always, stay reading. Peace out.